So the other day, I tried this game Grace with my friends. I thought it was a really cool game, eliminating the slowness of other games I'm used to such as Doors and Pressure, and turning speed up to 100. But what I'm really interested in is the lore. So searching the internet for any other lore fans like me, I found this video by Superderplux, which delves into the theory of the lore. Of course, the dreaded description of the game says this might all be changed, but for now I want to elaborate more on this person's theory. Please check it out. However, if you won't because you're a coward, here's a quick summary. The eye when you die represents God, and the rooms were created as a path to them. This is supported by this badge with references to Michelangelo's creation of Adam, and so the eye, this black hand, is like God. The badge when you first join is also of this eye, which has the name Genesis, and a really biblical sounding description. Of recording this video, there currently is no ending, which removes most opportunities for lore, so we'll see if we meet this entity at the end, or maybe there never will be an end, like a metaphor for eternal suffering. Or something. Anyways, in Superderplux's video they describe each entity as a sin, or as a test to see if we are worthy enough to meet them. They are as follows: Slight as envy, Heat as pride, Dozer as sloth, Slugfish as greed, and the others were more like suggestions in the video, such as Sorrow as lust, Alchemon as wrath, and Carnation as gluttony. While I do agree with some, I could argue another sin for others, but please keep in mind that this is all my opinion. This person may be right, I may get some right, or maybe this metaphor will be removed entirely, who knows. Anyways, let's get into my theory. In order to connect each entity to a sin, I started by looking at the comments and I noticed people talking about the badge descriptions, so of course I did the exact same thing. Then, after that, I thought about how you defeat these entities and how that correlates to overcoming a sin. For example, you defeat greed by being content with what you have, and sloth by not being lazy. Let's start with them in order: pride, greed, lust, envy, gluttony, wrath, and sloth. For starters, pride is the most iconic of all the sins in my opinion, but this must go to Dozer. You might be thinking, hey, Prospero, what about Dozer being sloth? That kinda fits, right? Remember, the way I'm correlating them is by how you defeat them and how you overcome this in real life. It would make sense to defeat sloth by standing still and crouching in my opinion. So stick around and find out who's sloth. Anyways, this is pride, as this one comment says on Superderplux's video, we are kneeling. Though this doesn't really suit overcoming pride, does it? Actually it does. Although kneeling does feel like a sin as it's like a worship of other gods, I view it more as acknowledging that you are not the best. Pride is the excess loving of your own excellence, and Dozer forces us to stop and kneel to a higher power. Although Dozer means sleep, and the message when you die to Dozer is, will you wake up tomorrow? I believe this means more of, will you wake up from the delusion of self-worship? As in, will you open your eyes and see who has a higher power? This is also supported by the description of the badge: swallow your ego or he will. In conclusion, I think Dozer represents pride. For greed, I really do agree with the choice of Slugfish. How, when I first started playing with my friend, we both called him greed and would warn the other to not get too greedy. It's quite an obvious choice. The badge description quite literally is, stay patient, no greed. So they're probably greed. You defeat greed by being patient and not progressing further, although Slugfish might also be argued to represent gluttony, but we'll get into that later. For lust, I remember the odd choice of Alchemon. Why? Essentially, Alchemon is an entity that forces you to hide, or slowly melts you. I feel like this is similar to how lust works, especially with the added mechanic of being trapped if you touch Alchemon. Being in Alchemon's presence makes you hazy, and well, lust does the same thing? I suppose Alchemon can also be wrath, but I couldn't find anything else that suited lust in such a way, especially with the badge description of Alchemon not having any eyes. In the Bible, it quite literally says, if your eye causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. You could also make the argument that wrath is also blind, but like, let me have this. He's close enough, right? For envy, I agree with the choice of slight. By looking at him, discouraging words appear on your screen, which is like how you look at another person with envy. You start to think discouraging things as you wish with the other person. Canonically, slight replaces one of your eyes. Makes sense, right? Your eyesight gets blinded by envy. Wow, lots of things in this game blind you, huh? But I believe that heat and slight represent the same sin. Heat represents envy itself, and we must keep watch of it in order to control it, as suggested in the Bible. If we don't, it will take hold of us and trap us. So heat is envy and slight is the object of envy. This is mainly supported by them having matching badge descriptions and mechanics, so they're clearly connected. Gluttony! Gluttony. This one was more difficult. Yes, I do agree with Carnation as gluttony, but it doesn't quite match up to how you defeat it. How do you defeat gluttony? By not overeating. That's kinda hard to communicate in a game, isn't it? However, in order to defeat Carnation, you consume some rooms and then stop and hide in a low high place. Carnation doesn't. Carnation keeps going, a sign of overindulgence. If you do the same, you'll die, hence gluttony. Or if you're too slow, you get eaten. You have to take a rest in one of the rooms, like digesting almost, and then move on. I do think Slugfish and Carnation can be swapped, but I think Carnation suits gluttony better, as there's no incentive to try and go a room further, like Slugfish. Greed and gluttony are similar sins, so it makes sense that the entities representing them are quite similar, but I'm sticking with my choices. Wrath, a bit more difficult. I think it is sorrow, mainly because the badge profile picture is someone waiting in a bloody rain with an umbrella. By taking a moment to breathe, you take a moment to rest, which is how you stop anger. Granted, this is hard to do in such a fast-paced game, but hey, the point still stands. If you don't take shelter, you die. You get crushed by wrath, quite literally. Also, the note that tells you how to survive sorrow also tells you that the drops serve the soul. These drops can represent anger, and each anger builds up to wrath, which ultimately kills you. And also, sorrow is a negative emotion like wrath, so like sorrow leads to wrath. I don't know, it works in my brain. And finally, sloth. I actually think Goatman is a really nice fit, though Superderplux does not include this creature as a sin. They appear when you're too slow, which is what sloth is, and they can be put off. But once you've indulged in sloth, you're stuck, unless you get into a safe room. Although Goatman does resemble a goat, which are normally devil-associated creatures, I just think it's a sign of them being associated with a sin, not necessarily of pride, which is what Lucifer represents, as it was the sin he committed. Also, goats have the image of being lazy, although they actually aren't, so I think he does represent sloth. And that's the end. Here's Superderplux's theory, and mine. Of course, everyone is entitled to their own theories and opinions, and my theory is not canon at all. In fact, they may not even represent sins and are just entities, and this is all coming from atheists, so take that as you will. My knowledge and the Bible are very limited, and lots of Google searches were used. Thank you for the Wiki for having such nice photos of each entity, note, and gameplay, and for Superderplux for making the video that inspired me to make this one in the first place. Please leave any theories in the comments below and say goodbye to me everyone. Goodbye.